Billionaire Victoria Blackwood, heir to the vast Blackwood Industries empire, stepped into the cold, damp cemetery, her steps heavy with the weight of loss. I had come to visit the grave of her son, Adrien, who had tragically died in a car accident 3 years ago. The November rain fell lightly, but it made the world feel mournful, each droplet seeming to mirror the ache in Victoria's heart. In her gloved hands, she clutched a bouquet of white lilies, an offering to the son she had lost so suddenly, so painfully. The cemetery was quiet, save for the soft tapping of the rain against the gravestones. Victoria's mind was consumed with thoughts of Adrien, the life he would never live, and the dreams that had been ripped away with his untimely death. At 55, Victoria had long been accustomed to power, control, and certainty, but the loss of her son had shattered her world, leaving her adrift in a sea of unanswered questions. As she approached Adrien's grave, the image of her son's marble tombstone etched deeply into her memory, something unusual caught her eye. A young woman, dressed in a waitress uniform, stood by the grave, holding a small child in her arms. The woman was crying, her tears falling freely as she gazed at the grave. The child, no older than 4, rested in her arms, his tiny face twisted. In sorrow, Victoria stopped in her tracks, her heart racing. She had never seen this woman before, never heard of her. Who was she, and why was she crying at her son's grave? The child's features seemed strangely familiar, and Victoria's mind raced with the possibility of a hidden connection. The woman's posture, her trembling hands clutching the child tightly to her chest, spoke of a deep pain, a sorrow that felt all too real. Victoria couldn't take it anymore. Her voice, sharp and commanding, sliced through the stillness of the cemetery. "Excuse me," she said, her tone cutting through the silence like a knife. "This is a private moment. You're in the wrong place." The young woman lifted her face slowly, revealing eyes red from crying. She appeared startled, but there was something in her gaze that held Victoria's attention, a quiet strength, a dignity that caught her off guard. "I'm sorry," the woman said, her voice trembling, but steady. "I didn't know anyone was coming today." Victoria's eyes narrowed. There was something about this woman's voice that intrigued her. The tone was soft, yet filled with a quiet resolve that Victoria hadn't expected. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. "And why are you crying at my son's grave?" The child in the woman's arms lifted his face to meet Victoria's gaze. His eyes, bright green, the color of a lush summer meadow, were piercing and familiar. Victoria felt a jolt in her chest as she stared into those eyes, eyes that mirrored her own eyes she had seen in the mirror for years. The realization hit her with the force of a freight train. This child, these eyes. They were identical to Adrien's, but how could that be? The woman, her face still streaked with tears, gently wiped her eyes with the back of her hand before responding. "My name is Jasmine Washington," she said softly, almost hesitantly. "And this is Tyler. I work at Bell's Diner in town. I come here every month because Adrien was important to us. To me. To him." Victoria stood there, frozen, her thoughts swirling like a tornado in her mind. Adrien had died 3 years ago in a tragic car accident at the age of 28. She had mourned him deeply, consumed by grief, unable to move forward. Her empire, the one she had spent her entire life building, felt empty without him. It investigated every aspect of his life after his death, trying to find some meaning in the loss. Some trace of a relationship, a partner, a child, but she had found nothing. Nothing that could explain this moment. Important how? Victoria's voice dropped an octave, her tone cold and calculating. She wanted answers, and she wanted them now. Jasmine met Victoria's gaze, her eyes steady, unwavering. "Because Tyler is his son," she said. "Because I promised Adrien that I would always take care of him, no matter what." Victoria's hands shook, the bouquet of lilies slipping from her fingers and scattering across the cold stone of the grave. Her heart pounded in her chest. 3 years of mourning, 3 years of believing the Blackwood bloodline had died with Adrien, and now she was discovering that she had a grandson, a black grandson. raised by a waitress. For a moment, the world around Victoria blurred. She couldn't understand how this could be true. She had raised Adrienne to be a part of the Blackwood legacy, a future leader of the empire. But this child, this boy, was the product of a hidden relationship, one that had been kept from her. Jasmine stood silently, watching as Victoria's emotions shifted from confusion to disbelief. But there was more to this story. Something Victoria couldn't yet comprehend. Jasmine's eyes, filled with a mix of sorrow and courage, seemed to tell a deeper story, one that was not yet revealed. I don't understand," Victoria stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't Adrian tell me about this? Why didn't he come to me?" Jasmine hesitated, looking down at the child in her arms before speaking again, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. "Because there were things he wanted to protect you from," she said softly. "Things that had nothing to do with Tyler." Victoria's head spun as the weight of Jasmine's words sank in. Adrienne had been hiding something so important that he had never told her about his son. What secrets lay buried beneath the surface of their relationship? What had he kept from her? But even as the storm of questions raged in her mind, something else lingered in the back of Victoria's thoughts. There was a caution in Jasmine's eyes, a fear that seemed to speak of more than just a hidden child. Victoria could sense that. This was only the beginning. Jasmine was keeping something from her, something bigger than just the existence of a grandson, and for the first time in her life, Victoria Blackwood felt like she was no longer in control. This encounter, this revelation, was just the start of a much larger game. A game that would challenge everything she thought she knew about her family, her empire, and herself. 2 weeks had passed since the fateful encounter in the cemetery. But for Victoria Blackwood, the world had yet to settle. The encounter with Jasmine and Tyler had shaken her to her core. Every night since, she found herself unable to sleep, her thoughts consumed by the implications of what she had learned. A grandson, a child she never knew existed. And now, an entire new life had unfolded before her. One she hadn't been prepared for. She had always been in control, the ruler of Blackwood Industries, but this revelation was an unpredictable storm, one she hadn't seen coming. Victoria had turned her private library into a war room. The century-old mahogany table, once a place for reading and reflection, was now cluttered with documents. Each page was a private investigator's report, each word detailing pieces of Jasmine Washington's life, her past, and most importantly, her connection to Adrienne. She flipped through the papers, her fingers trembling slightly. Single, no known family. Works 60 hours a week at 2 jobs to support her child, she muttered, reading aloud as her mind raced. Lives in a 1-bedroom apartment on the poor side of town. No formal education beyond high school. Victoria paused. She was struck by the image of Jasmine's modest life, a life that seemed so different from her own, yet somehow tied to her son. A waitress, a single mother. Yet, she had claimed that her life, her world, was tied to Adrienne's in ways Victoria still couldn't understand. Her assistant, David Chen, stood silently beside her. He had been with her for years, trusted and efficient, but even he could sense that this situation had unnerved her. "What do we know about her?" Victoria asked, her voice sharp with impatience, though a hint of unease colored it. David opened another folder, carefully sliding it across the table. "Well, her background is sparse. No criminal record, no ties to anyone of note, no previous relationships or anything substantial. The child's birth certificate is missing, along with hospital records. It's as though Tyler's entire existence has been erased from official documentation." Victoria's lips thinned as she absorbed the information. Her mind was calculating, as always. If Jasmine had lied about the birth records or concealed them, it might point to something deeper. But could she trust what was on paper? The woman had lied to her face already. Who knew what else she was hiding? Her mind flashed back to the cemetery, to Jasmine's words. "Tyler is Adrienne's son. I promised him I would take care of him no matter what." The certainty in Jasmine's voice had unsettled her. Was it just a story? Or was there something more to this woman than she let on? What about the child's mother? Victoria asked, her eyes fixed on the report detailing Jasmine's life. The more she read, the more unsettled she became. Is there any information about who Tyler's mother really is? David's response was calm but filled with a hint of surprise. Here's where it gets interesting, he said. He opened a different folder, one filled with photographs. The grainy photo of Tyler playing in a public playground was pinned. To the top, his innocent smile made Victoria's stomach twist. The boy looked so much like Adrienne, it almost seemed unreal. We couldn't find a birth certificate, hospital records, or any official documentation about who gave birth to Tyler. It's as if his biological mother never existed. Victoria's mind spun. Child. And yet there was no record of his birth, no trace of his mother. No trace of his mother. The complexity of it all twisted like a knot in her chest. She had to find out more. Jasmine was hiding something, and she was going to uncover it. Schedule a meeting with Jasmine, Victoria said, her voice colder than it had been all day. I want her in my office tomorrow at 2 p.m. I need answers, and I need them now. The next day, Jasmine arrived at Blackwood Industries headquarters. Victoria couldn't help but notice how out of place the young woman looked in her ill-fitting suit, purchased no doubt from a thrift store. Jasmine walked into the sleek building, her eyes scanning the towering structure that seemed to mock her modest appearance. But her determination was unmistakable. She had come here to fight for her son, and she wasn't going to back down. Victoria's office on the top floor was a calculated display of power with a panoramic view of the city. As she watched Jasmine walk into the room, Victoria couldn't help but feel a wave of superiority. This was her domain, and this woman, this waitress, was nothing compared to her. Yet as the two women faced each other, both knew this was no ordinary meeting. Sit down, Victoria said, gesturing to a chair placed slightly lower than her own. It was a silent reminder of the power dynamic. But Jasmine didn't take the seat. Instead, she stood, her posture unwavering. I'd rather stand, thank you, Jasmine replied, her voice calm but firm, making her discomfort clear. Victoria raised an eyebrow, surprised by the defiance. But she quickly recovered, shifting the conversation back to what mattered. Tyler, I've looked into you, Miss Washington, Victoria said, sliding a file across the desk. 2 jobs, no savings, living in conditions unsuitable for a child. You're doing the best you can, but you're not providing Tyler with the life he deserves. She'll let the words hang in the air before continuing. Tyler belongs with me. I can give him the best of everything: private schools, trips, opportunities. Jasmine's eyes narrowed slightly, her grip on her composure unwavering. Tyler is well cared for, and he is loved. I am his mother, and I have given him everything he needs. Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She leaned forward, her voice turning colder. $200,000. You can keep visiting him. Of course. But Tyler will live with me. I will give him the future his father would have wanted for him. The check slid across the desk, but Jasmine didn't even glance at it. She stared directly at Victoria, her expression unflinching. Are you trying to buy my son? Jasmine asked, her voice suddenly low but fierce. You can't buy him. Victoria, Tyler isn't for sale. The silence in the room stretched taut as the two women locked eyes. Victoria's smile faltered, but she was not one to be deterred. He's my grandson, and he deserves more than what you can offer. He deserves a family. Jasmine's lips curled into a wry smile. Family, she scoffed. Tyler has a family. He calls me Mom. I've been there for him every day, and I will continue to be there for him. You never even showed up for your own son's life, Victoria. So don't come here and tell me about family. The words hit Victoria like a slap. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. The reality of what Jasmine was saying, that she had failed Adrienne in ways that were now haunting her, was too much to bear. Jasmine continued, her voice steady. I don't need your money. I don't need your empire.
Ow.
All I need is Tyler, and I will do whatever it takes to protect him. Victoria stood up, her tall figure looming over Jasmine. We'll do this the hard way then, she said coldly. I have resources you can't even imagine. Lawyers, investigators, connections at every level of government. I will get Tyler. Jasmine didn't flinch. She simply smiled. A calm, confident smile that made Victoria feel, for the first time in her life, as though she was the one being outplayed. 2 days after the tense confrontation in Victoria's office, Daswan found herself in a different kind of meeting. With a team of people Victoria would never have expected her to know. In the modest apartment that Jasmine shared with Tyler, the small, one-bedroom space was now filled with figures who seemed out of place in this setting. But to Jasmine, these people weren't strangers. They were the reason she had prepared. For this moment, for 3 long years, Dr. Michael Chen, a law professor at Columbia University, sat at the small table, flipping through legal documents with a practiced hand. Beside him, Amanda Torres, an investigative journalist known for exposing corporate corruption, clicked away on her laptop. And at the center of it all, the woman Jasmine looked to for guidance, her Aunt Helen Washington, a sharp and elegant woman in her 50s, had raised Jasmine after her parents died. She was the one who taught Jasmine that knowledge and patience were the only weapons that couldn't be taken from her. "Jasmine, I'm glad you called me," Helen said, looking up from the window where she had been staring out at the modest city view. "You've done well. Your research is impressive." Jasmine smiled softly, holding Tyler as he played with his toys on the floor. "I've spent the last 3 years gathering everything I could. Every document, every piece of information. It's all been for this moment." Dr. Chen nodded, his brow furrowed as he examined the stack of papers in front of him. "You've got a strong legal strategy, but we need to be prepared. Victoria Blackwood has resources we can't even begin to fathom. She uses everything. She has to break you." Jasmine's face remained steady, her resolve unwavering. "I've been preparing for this my whole life. Every night class I've taken, every law book I've read, every contact I've made, it's all led me here. To protect Tyler, to honor Adrian's memory." Helen walked over to the small shelf of books on the wall, pulling down a family photo. The picture showed a younger version of Jasmine with Adrian, and a woman Jasmine had never mentioned before. Unfamiliar, fair-skinned woman who looked strikingly out of place. "This is the woman who will change everything," Helen said, handing Jasmine the photo. Her name was Jessica Blackwood, Adrian's lover and Tyler's mother. Jasmine's fingers trembled as she looked at the photo. She hadn't known the full extent of Adrian's past, the secrets he had kept from everyone, including her. Jessica Blackwood had been a part of this family's history, but Victoria had made sure her existence was erased. Adrian spent the last months of his life investigating her death. Jasmine continued, her voice cold with resolve. "When she died in childbirth, Adrian came to me. I promised him I'd take care of Tyler, and I promised Jessica the same thing. That's why I'm doing this." The room fell silent as the weight of Jasmine's words sank in. Her aunt, Dr. Chen, and Amanda Torres, all of them, had a role to play in this strategy, in the war that was about to unfold. They were all here for the same reason, to expose Victoria Blackwood for what she was. "I've gathered everything," Amanda said, her voice professional yet tinged with excitement. "We've got detailed evidence of Blackwood Industries, corrupt practices, bribes to local politicians, labor violations, fraudulent contracts. We have it all. It's just a matter of timing now." Jasmine nodded. "Timing is everything. But the most important thing is that we show Victoria for who she really is. We expose her lies, her greed, and the legacy she's built on corruption. It's not just about Tyler anymore. It's about justice." Helen smiled, a fierce pride in her eyes. "You've learned well, Jasmine. You know what you're doing. And you're not alone in this fight." Later that evening, as the team began to organize their next steps, Jasmine's phone rang. It was the one call she had been anticipating. But she wasn't ready for the calm, cutting voice on the other end. "Jasmine." Victoria's voice crackled through the receiver. "I have a proposition for you. $500,000. Take the money, and we'll make this all go away. You can visit Tyler on weekends. Just give him to me." Jasmine could feel the anger rising in her chest, but she stayed calm. "Victoria, you don't get it. Tyler isn't for sale. You can't buy him. Not for any price." Victoria's voice faltered, just for a moment, but then the icy tone returned. Then we'll do this the hard way, Jasmine. You think you can stand up to me? I have the money, the lawyers, the power. Jasmine smiled, a smile that held no humor. You're assuming money is the only power there is, Victoria? But you're wrong. There's something much stronger than money. And what's that? Victoria asked, her tone skeptical. Truth, Jasmine replied, her voice steady. The truth about your empire, about your dirty deals and your corrupt business practices. And I have all the proof I need. Victoria's laugh was a harsh, bitter sound. You're bluffing, she spat. You don't have anything. I will destroy you. I'll let you think that, Jasmine said, her voice a low, confident hum. But just remember, Victoria, you never know who's watching, who's listening, and when the time comes, I'll be ready. As Jasmine ended the call, she turned to the room full of allies who had spent years helping her prepare for this moment. Amanda, Dr. Chen, and Helen, all of them, had been instrumental in the planning, the gathering of evidence, and now it was time for the final stage. We're ready, Jasmine said quietly, glancing down at Tyler, who had drifted off. To sleep? The world will know the truth. This time it's not Victoria who's in control, it's us. It had been 2 weeks since the explosive revelations about Blackwood Industries began to unfold, and Victoria Blackwood's world was in ruins. Her empire, built over decades of hard work, had crumbled almost overnight. The leaked documents, the accusations of corruption, and the relentless investigation by Amanda Torres had all contributed to the rapid destruction of the Blackwood legacy. Victoria had never imagined that her life would fall apart in such a way, especially at the hands of a young waitress and a child she had never known existed. Her wealth and power had always shielded her from the consequences of her actions. But now, for the first time in her life, Victoria was truly powerless. The IRS had seized her accounts. Blackwood Industries stock was suspended. Federal agents had raided her office, collecting evidence of her illegal dealings. It was as though the walls of her empire had been systematically dismantled by people who weren't afraid of her. People who were determined to expose the truth. Victoria's personal phone rang at precisely 8 a.m. that morning. It was Richard Thornton, her longtime lawyer, and his voice, usually calm and professional, was filled with panic. Victoria, he said, his voice trembling. It's bad. It's really bad. The FBI just called. They've got everything. The charges. They're bringing you in. The SEC is already involved. Your assets are frozen. The company is finished. Victoria's grip on the phone tightened. How did this happen? She demanded, trying to maintain some semblance of control, but the words came out shakily. Jasmine Washington, Richard replied. She had it all planned. Everything. She had a team working with her, the best legal and investigative experts. He didn't see it coming. Victoria slammed her fist on the table, frustration bubbling over. That damn waitress, she hissed. I'll make her regret this. But deep down, she knew it was too late. She had underestimated Jasmine, just as she had underestimated Adrian all those years ago. Her son had been a part of something much bigger than she ever realized, and now the truth had come back to haunt her. Jasmine wasn't just fighting for a child, she was fighting for justice. For everything Victoria had taken for granted. As the days passed, the media frenzy surrounding Blackwood Industries reached a fever pitch. News outlets across the country were reporting on the scandal, each headline more damning than the last. Investigative reports exposed fraudulent contracts, illegal payments to politicians, money laundering schemes, and environmental violations that Victoria had long kept hidden. Her reputation, built over decades of strategic business moves, was being destroyed in a matter of hours. Meanwhile, Jasmine's life had begun to change in ways she hadn't anticipated. Tyler, the young boy she had fought so hard to protect, was now the heir to the Blackwood estate. But more importantly, he had become a symbol of everything that had been wrong with Victoria's empire, the child who had been hidden away, only to be thrust into the limelight by the fight for his future. Jasmine, despite her earlier reservations, had become a beacon of hope for those who believed that power could be dismantled, that the truth could prevail, and that family could be rebuilt in ways that transcended money and status in a small Connecticut town. Tyler was starting school at Phillips Academy, the same prestigious school Adrienne had attended. Jasmine watched with pride as her son, no longer a scared little boy, thrived in an environment that offered him the opportunities he had always deserved. He was excelling in his studies, and his teachers were already predicting a bright future for him. Music, especially the violin, had become his passion. Jasmine often found herself lost in the sound of him playing at the piano, a melody that reminded her of the promise she had made to Adrien to give his son a life full of love, education, and dignity. Then, just as Jasmine thought things might settle, she received an unexpected call. It was from the prison, Miss Washington. The voice on the other end said, "You have a visitor? It's Victoria Blackwood." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. Victoria? After everything that had happened, after the war they had fought, Jasmine had not expected this. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she was ready to face the woman who had tried to destroy everything she had worked for. But then she remembered the lessons she had learned from her aunt, from Dr. Chen, from Amanda. This was the final chapter.
Oh.
It was time to put everything behind her. "I'll come," Jasmine said, her voice steady. "I'll be there." Victoria sat across from her in the visiting room, her once pristine appearance now worn, a far cry from the powerful businesswoman she had once been. She was dressed in the standard orange jumpsuit of a convicted felon, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her face was haggard, and the sharp, calculating eyes Jasmine had once feared were now filled with something entirely different. Defeat. "I didn't think you would come," Victoria said, her voice a low, almost reluctant admission. "I thought you'd hate me for everything I've done." Jasmine took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "I didn't come here to gloat, Victoria. I came here to tell you that everything I've done has been for Tyler, for his future, for the future that Adrien would have wanted for him." Victoria's eyes darkened. "You've taken everything from me. The company, my money, my name. You've destroyed my life." "No, Victoria," Jasmine replied softly. "You destroyed your own life. I didn't do anything but expose the truth. You built an empire on lies. Now it's crumbling." For a moment, neither woman spoke. The air between them was thick with the weight of everything that had transpired. Jasmine could see that Victoria had finally understood the consequences of her actions too late. But still, a realization had dawned on her. "I'm sorry," Victoria finally whispered, her voice breaking. I never meant for any of this to happen." Jasmine leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking with Victoria's. "I know you didn't, but it doesn't change anything. The truth is out now, and Tyler's future is secure. He's going to be fine, Victoria. He's loved, and that's all that matters." Victoria's gaze dropped to the table, her hands shaking. For the first time, Jasmine saw the woman in front of her not as a formidable enemy, but as a broken solo woman who had lost everything, not because of Jasmine, but because of her own choices. "Tyler is my legacy now," Jasmine said firmly. "Not you, not your empire. And one day, he will know the truth about everything that happened. He will know that his family fought for justice, not revenge." As Jasmine left the prison, a sense of calm washed over her. She had won, not just for herself, but for Tyler, for Adrien, and for the family that had been broken by lies and greed. She didn't need Victoria's money, her power, or her approval. Jasmine had something much more important, a future built on love, truth, and justice. And as she looked out the window of the prison, she knew that this was just the beginning of a new life for her and Tyler, a life that would be defined by their own choices, not by the mistakes of the past.